Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
If subsistence hunting, trapping, and fishing are important to you, please consider applying for one of the open seats on your Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Council. These seats will be filled by rural Alaskans who are knowledgeable about fish and wildlife subsistence in their region. Apply by Friday, January 29th, 2016. Information at 1-800-478-1456 or email subsistence@fws.gov.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 10th of December, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information at weather.gov/Alaska. You can call us on the weather info line at 800-472-0391. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. If you've been watching Facebook in the last half hour or so, you would have had new information about the Aleutian storm that's developing. We expect that to arrive into Saturday. Late Friday night into Saturday and Sunday will be very stormy periods for the southern Bering Sea and the Aleutians, and we'll have more information on that here in just a minute. In the meantime, wind chill advisory is posted for the North Slope and around the Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse area and east of the Colville River, or just to the west, I should say. And as a result of that, we could see a feels-like index of about 45 to 50 below in some cases, maybe even colder. That'll continue until about 6 o'clock in the morning for all of the areas shaded in yellow. That stretches from the Alcan all the way to the west along the north slopes of the Brooks Range and right up to the summits there. It does not include anywhere southward toward the Yukon at this point. Here's a look at the satellite picture, and there are several waves of low pressure here. One sitting across the central Gulf that is churning and gathering up some unstable air. We've seen some showers across the eastern Gulf today, but I haven't seen a whole lot of thunder and lightning as we did in previous days. On the south side of that is another wave of low pressure working northward, and as that continues to move north, that is bringing up another round of cloud cover through southeast, and that will probably turn into some showers as we get into late tonight and into tomorrow, mainly for offshore areas there. Watch for that to develop. Out across the west, you can see several other waves across the southern and western sections of Alaska. Now we've got a band of clouds here stretching across the Alaska Peninsula. That is bringing some snow showers across the west coast, as well as some rain and snow around Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, but heavy snow falling around St. Paul there. Didn't see that in the St. George observation, but it looked like some periods of heavy snow were falling across northern sections of the Pribilofs there. And you can see the clouds building back into southeast. Across the north slope, we've got some clouds mainly across the west, but up north it's been clear enough that morning temperatures have dropped off significantly and remain cold, of course, during the day. This is some of the coldest periods of the year, of course, with temperatures from about 15 to 25 below, and then a wind chill index that's even colder. Out across the west, clouds building in from the north and from the southwest, I should say. This is in advance of a minor wave of low pressure working through, but quickly on its heels will be a much stronger system, and we'll show you that here in the surface maps here in just a moment. Today's weather shows low pressure just south of Haida Gwaii, 968 millibars. This is working northward and kind of rotating around itself, so another wave of low pressure will work northward as this particular circulation continues to drop southward. We've got a low sitting across the northern Gulf at 982 millibars, and this is just kind of sitting here and gradually filling in on itself. It's really not going anywhere in particular. Low pressure also sitting across the north slope at 1004 millibars has a wave of low pressure south of that, and all of this is kind of rotating around on itself as the jet stream is well to our south. Alaska's kind of sitting in the storm doldrums at the moment, but things are changing. Out across the western Bering, a 1005 millibar low, dragging in some snow showers across the western Bering, and once again those clouds across the west will start to move quickly eastward and fill in across the west coast, with a better chance of snow across the west coast tonight and across the Aleutians. Look for more snow in the Pribilofs. South Central's looking at some light snow, possibly around the Cook Inlet region all the way down to Kodiak Island, and rain showers for the northern and eastern Gulf. Not a lot of that seeming to get into southeastern Alaska at this point. Another clear night for the North Slope. A little bit more wind for some of the North Slope and the Arctic coast there. It could mean, again, some very dangerously cold weather and a wind chill advisory again until 6 o'clock in the morning. Here's a look at Friday, and low pressure across the western Bering stretches all the way into the central chain. That, with rain and snow combined, could make kind of a gloomy start there for your Friday. For southwestern Alaska, the wind starts to tighten up a little bit more from the Seward Peninsula all the way down toward the Alaska Peninsula. As a result of that, you get a little bit more of a north and westerly flow coming in across the peninsula itself, and that could bring some snow to the Bering Sea coast, as well as areas along the lower Yukon and the upper Kuskokwim. South Central still looking at some snow from time to time across the region for Friday, with periods of rain and rain mixed with snow across some parts of southeastern Alaska, especially the southern areas. Now watch what happens on Saturday. This is going to be a big shift from 24 hours on Friday to the next 24 hours into Saturday. You look out to the west, and all of a sudden, a rapidly intensifying system comes out of the eastern Asia coastline and makes it all the way into the central and western Aleutians in very rapid succession. As a result, we're watching a storm that could drop to about 932 millibars for Saturday afternoon. That is a powerful system, of course, on its own without anything else going on, but it looks like this will have some strong winds wrapping around on the back side of this, and right now we're looking at about storm force to maybe even hurricane force winds on the western side. But we don't see a whole lot of impacts beyond that. If you're looking at this and saying, well, what about the west coast? What about southwestern Alaska? What about the Pribilofs? We're watching this very carefully, but at this time we don't have any watches, warnings, or any alerts out for any of the western coasts. We will be tracking this carefully over the weekend, and we want you to do the same thing. You can do that either by watching Alaska weather. We would prefer that you listen to NOAA Weather Radio and, of course, Marine VHF. If you're in this out on the coast, or maybe you're in the Pribilofs or the eastern or central chain, you definitely want to keep a track where the system's going and what that means for you as far as wind goes, snowfall, seas, or perhaps even coastal erosion. Right now, none of those things are expected to have any major impact on any of our Alaska communities, but we are watching, and as this system gets closer to us in time, we'll have a much better idea about what could happen as this develops. So right now, Saturday, we're looking at 932 millibar low, which does have some powerful winds and pretty high seas out there, but as far as any major impacts to the southwestern villages and the coastline, we're not seeing that at this point. For South Central, a weaker wave of low pressure, significantly weaker, is bringing rain and snow showers there. It looks like snow showers will continue up the Parks Highway and into central Alaska along that wave that's working on the northern side. That'll go from east to west and across southeast. Periods of rain start to move back in. Remember how we said this low pressure system was kind of wrapping around on itself? We kind of have two sections here, and it kind of flops over on itself. Well, here's one of those flops. It's working northward once again up the eastern seaboard with a little bit of ridging taking shape across the Gulf in advance of what's coming in from the west. So we'll be watching this. On the back side of this, there's certainly some colder weather that's going to try and drop southward. Here's a look at temperatures today. 30s and 40s for southeast. You can see all the way from Craig and Klawock. We saw temps closer to 40. Ketchikan and Annette a little bit closer to that 40-degree mark as well. On the northern end, lower to mid-30s around Juneau and up toward Haines and Skagway. 31 in Yakutat today. 41 in Middleton Island. Teens, 20s, and even 30s around Prince William Sound today. 22 in Anchorage, Homer, and Seward in the 30s and above freezing. Golcana was 8 below. Wait till you see the forecast for temperatures there tonight. It's going to get a lot colder. 11 below in Fairbanks, 4 below in Fort Yukon, 0 in Eagle, and the river is still moving according to Ann. 11 below in Arctic Village, and temperatures around Barrow, 4 below, but Atkasuka was 12 below with Kaktovik at 15 below, Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse down to 20 below. And pretty cold stuff around Wainwright, anywhere from 8 below to 15 below on the northwest coast. And temps inside of Kotzebue Sound, anywhere from 20 to about 22 below from Kivalina to Kotzebue, and all the way around to Shishmaref. Temperatures warmed up a little bit to 1, 5 above in Nome, 1 above in Unalakleet. McGrath was 11 below. Galena and Caltag all looking at temps anywhere from 15, 20, even 30 below there in the Yukon Valley and the Koyukuk Valley. 1 below in Bethel today. It was 7 above in Nunivak Island and 4 Gamble and St. Lawrence Island. And southwestern temperatures struggle to warm up much today as well. Single digits and low teens for Bristol Bay, teens and 20s for the Aleutian Range, and then as you head southward from Pilot Point, back into the 30s for Sand Point, Cold Bay, and Falls Pass. Unalaska and Dutch Harbor saw 36, upper 20s for St. Paul and St. George, again with snow in the region, and lower to mid 30s for the central and western chain, Attu at 31. Now, overnight low temperatures, as I said, watch for Gulf Canna. You're down to 20 below in the Copper River Valley tonight. It's going to be a cold, clear, and still night for you. Low to mid-teens for south central, 30s around Kodiak Island and the southern Kenai coastline, 16 in Cordova, southeast looking at 20s and 30s. The interior, including Fairbanks, in the mid to, let's say mid-teens below 0 to about 30 below around Fort Yukon. 31 below for Bettles. Looks like some areas around Arctic Village could drop to about 39 below, so cold stuff for you. Very cold night indeed. 20 below around Barrow. Looks like the Seward Peninsula will see temps from about 5 to 10 below. Kotzebue Sound anywhere from 15 to 20 below. Southwest, single digits in the lower teens. As you head into Bristol Bay, 20s for the Alaska Peninsula, 30s on the Pacific coastline, and 20s and 30s for the Aleutian chain. High temperatures tomorrow are not going to change much for those in Southwest or the Aleutians. Looks like mostly 30s for you. Single digits and teens for the southwestern coast. The YK Delta looking at around 8 for Ammonok. 8 or so for Nome. Looks like lower single digits, maybe 0 around Kotzebue Sound. So some recovery there. And for the Arctic coast, 15 to 20 below in many locations. Arctic Village gets a little reprieve there, back into about minus 13 by the afternoon. 10 above for Fairbanks and warming up. Low 20s to mid 30s for South Central, 38 for Kodiak Island, and upper 30s, almost 40 in fact, for southern parts of Southeast on that warmer flow. MVFR conditions are expected across the northwestern coast and around Bristol Bay, a little bit further north from about Dillingham westward, in fact, to Cape Newenham, and south of Bethel. Expect IFR conditions to develop in the afternoon. Around Prince William Sound, we expect IFR. Southeast looking okay. Most of south central and the Cook Inlet region looking okay, and most of the Alaska Range passes in the interior shaping up to be okay. Ahead of that next weaker wave of low pressure in the central chain, MVFR conditions should develop for Adak and Atka. Past conditions, though, we're going to say Anaktuvik, while miserably cold, VFR conditions there and for Adigan Pass as well. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we expect to see MVFR through most of the day. Rainy Pass should lean over toward MVFR as the day goes on. Windy Pass we expect to be visual through most of the day. Isabel Pass looks A-OK. Mentasta Pass, visibility and ceiling should be okay. Tanita Pass looks to be okay at the moment at VFR. And for Portage Pass, expect that to lean over toward IFR on the eastern side, especially around Prince William Sound. Chilkoot and White Pass at this point looking good at VFR. Surface freezing levels show that elevated freezing lines from 2,000 to 4,000 feet are mainly hovering across southeastern Alaska and south of Haida Gwaii. You can see that warmer air is kind of lurking across the eastern Gulf, but certainly not spreading north or west at this time. The surface freezing lines also drop south of the Pribilovs and over Bristol Bay as we start up tomorrow. Icing potential will be limited along that trough of low pressure in the upper atmosphere from southeast and Craig and Klawock to about Yakutat, and then over the Anchorage Bowl, the northern parts of Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound, and all the way out into the northern parts of the Yukon Delta, below about 10,000 feet and as high as about 6,000 feet. So kind of a limited range right here across the southern third of Alaska. And then out west, building in above 2,000 feet, watch for some isolated moderate ahead of that next wave of low pressure. Here's the jet stream, and you can see those main quarter of weather currents there, anywhere from 155 knots south of Kodiak Island to 140 knots south of the Kamchatka Peninsula. So the storm tomorrow that we're talking about moving into the Aleutians is right about here, and it's going to just zip itself right into the central and western Aleutians. Pretty fast stuff, and it has the means to do so because of this fast-moving current of air at 30,000 feet. Off the coast of the northwest, you see 140 knots there, around a low pressure moving right over Portland and northwestern sections of Oregon. And then as you move into the British Columbia region, got another fast-moving river of air there, around 65 knots. And over the north coast, also another little surge of air, but the main current again is a jet stream that's just south of Alaska. At 9,000 feet, we have more of a westerly flow coming over the Aleutians and into the Gulf. And those wind speeds slow down as they move into southeastern Alaska, around 15 to 25 knots. 30 to 35 coming in from the south across south central, and in the interior, wind speeds around 10 to 15 knots. Also mostly due south. They pick up as you get over the Beaufort Seacoast around 40 knots. High pressure is trying to slow things down across the Bering Sea around 40 knots or so. They slow down a little bit getting closer to the coast, but they're still zipping in there south of the Bering Strait. And then out west, you can see the winds are already picking up to about 60 to 80 knots south of Attu. And we find similar conditions there at 3,000 feet. Fast moving winds south of the Aleutians, a little bit slower over the Bering itself. Faster winds coming down the west coast, 35 to 40 knots there out of the Bering Strait, wrapping into low pressure across southwestern Alaska tomorrow, 25 to 35 there. Across south central, look for 20 to 30 knots across the region, slowing down a little bit more across the upper Yukon Valley, 10 to 20 there. And for southeast, look for 15 to 20 knots across the Panhandle as we start up your Friday. Here's a look at turbulence then, and we're going to watch for this to really change as we go through the rest of the weekend and into early next week. Right now it looks like isolated moderate is possible from Nome out toward St. Lawrence Island, across the YK Delta, Nunivak Island toward the Aleutian Range and the Alaska Peninsula, and then across the central and western parts of the chain below 5,000 feet. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with a sea ice update as well as the rest of your marine weather. Stay tuned.
Happy winter solstice.
Welcome to Stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. The winter solstice occurs on Monday, December 21st, and the sun will stop its southward migration and start heading north again.
Exactly, James. And this means that from this point forward, the days will be getting longer and longer.
Plus, we have a parade of perfectly positioned planets in the pre-dawn sky.
What are we talking about? Let's show you.
The changing seasons are caused by one thing, the 23.5-degree tilt of the Earth. As our planet rotates daily on its axis, we also revolve around the sun. But our rotational axis is tilted compared to our orbit around the sun, and we always keep this slanted view.
When we, in the northern hemisphere, are tilted most directly toward the sun, we soak up a lot of solar energy. That day is called the summer solstice, and it occurred on June 21st this year. At this point, the sun's rays shine most directly on the northern hemisphere. We get more energy per square inch, and thus it's hotter.
6 months later, the Earth has moved to the opposite side of the sun, yet we're still tilted in the same direction. Therefore, we in the northern hemisphere are now tilted away from the sun.
The sun's rays strike us at a low angle, thus spreading out the same energy over a larger area. Therefore, each square inch gets a lot less energy than in the summer. We call this the winter solstice, and that occurs on December 21st this year.
Alrighty, let's see how this looks from the surface of the Earth. Okay, we have our skies set to December 21st just before sunrise. Let's trace the path that the sun takes across the sky on this, the shortest day of the year. The sun will rise south of east and reach its highest point in the southern sky around noon. Then the sun will set south of west.
For most of the country, you'll get about 9 to 10 hours of daylight on this day. That also means you'll get 14 to 15 hours of darkness.
Let's compare this to the spring equinox. Next year, it'll be on March 19th. Now, let's trace the path that the sun takes on this day. The sun will rise due east, reach its highest point above the horizon, and then set due west.
Notice how the sun went higher in the sky than it did in December. The higher the sun, the more direct energy we get.
And look how much longer the sun was in the sky. 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness. Equal day, equal night. That's why they call it the equinox.
Now what about the summer solstice? Now our sky is set to June 20th, 2016, and we can watch the sun rise north of east, go very high in the south, and set north of west.
The sun went higher still in the sky, and the hours of daylight reach a whopping 14 to 15 hours for most of us in the US, with only 9 to 10 hours of darkness.
And all this is caused by the 23.5-degree tilt of the Earth.
Okay, we have our sky set for about an hour before sunrise any time this week. If you look high in the southern sky, you'll see the giant planet Jupiter among the stars of Leo the Lion.
To the east of Jupiter, look for the red planet Mars. It'll be fairly close to Spica, the brightest star in Virgo the Maiden.
Then, even further to the east, you'll see the dazzling planet Venus among the stars of Libra the Scales.
Lastly, you might, just might, catch a glimpse of the ringed planet Saturn as it makes its reappearance near the horizon in the constellation of Scorpius the Scorpion.
So, there you have it. On December 21st, watch this extreme southerly sunset.
And in 6 more months, it will reach the other extreme, northernmost sunset on the summer solstice on June 20th.
And check out the lineup of the planets before sunrise and soak up the solstice sun because the longer days are on their way back.
And it's all there for you this week if you
Keep looking up.
When I go out on the water, I want to concentrate on having fun. I check the water and weather conditions before I go. I don't want to struggle against tidal currents, wind, or big waves, or be caught off guard by changing weather. I always wear a life jacket and dress for the water temperature. In cold water, hypothermia is a real risk. I make sure my skill level matches the conditions, and I always kayak with other people. Play it safe and have fun. What a beautiful day to be on the water. But are you playing it safe? Avoid boating alone. Let a friend or family member know your trip plan. Be aware of boat traffic navigation rules and give motorized vehicles a wide berth. Be especially careful near docks and marinas. Have a marine radio in case of emergency. And always wear your life jacket. Remember, play it safe and have fun.
Here's a look at the sea ice edge now, and a lot of this could change as we get into early next week, and we'll certainly find out how much of that ice is really shore fast across the west and southwest coast. In the meantime, it is still growing, in some cases kind of a rapid order. You can see how areas that are now over 80% concentration north of St. Lawrence Island are dropping south of the Bering Strait and working out of Norton Sound and off the southwestern coast. Many areas around Bristol Bay also seeing more and more ice south and outside of Naknek, and we still have some smaller concentrations there across the northern Cook Inlet. You can always get the latest sea ice edge update as well as the forecast for the next 5 days by going to weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. Here's a look at southeast now. The winds coming out of the Lynn Canal, not too bad. A light breeze at 15 knots with a 3-foot sea tomorrow. Northeasterlies coming through Stevens Passage at 20 knots with a 4-foot sea. Southeasterlies over Clarence Strait at 10 knots. Southwesterlies from Cross Sound southward to the Dixon entrance at 15 knots with an 11 to 13-foot sea, and southeasterlies will be a little stronger around Yakutat and Icy Cape with a 10-foot sea on a 20-knot wind for Friday. Westerlies will be light as we get into Saturday. Looks like that light wind continues down the coast from 10 to about 20 knots. They're picking up a little bit more outside of Dixon entrance with an 11-foot sea. On the inside, southeasterlies up into Clarence Strait, 20 knots with a 4-foot sea, and light winds continue out of the Lynn Canal and southward, about 15 knots with a 3-foot sea there on Saturday. Across Cook Inlet on Friday, winds will be a little stronger, 25 to 30 knots with 7 to 11-foot seas in the ice-free areas. Northerlies west of the Barrens at 30 knots, and east of the Barrens, 30 knots with an 11-foot sea. Easterlies inside of Prince William Sound at 20 knots with 9-foot seas mainly across the north and western Gulf. 11-foot seas east of Kodiak Island will hold about at that level for Saturday, but the winds will switch to more of a north and westerly direction. Look for westerlies to be light across the Barrens at 20 knots with 7 to 10-foot seas there. 10-knot winds there out of the northern parts of the Cook Inlet with a 2-foot sea. Westerlies are reversing course there a little bit further south of Callaghan Island. And southerlies coming up into Prince William Sound. Looks like light winds, 10 knots with a 2-foot sea on Saturday. Across the Alaska Peninsula, freezing spray is going to be an issue anywhere close to the ice edge. Look for westerlies inside of Bristol Bay and down the coast. 25 to 30 knots with 7 to 11-foot seas and 10-foot seas across the Pacific coastline. 25 to 30 knots are expected there. For Saturday, look for northwesterlies across the Bering Sea coast and inside of Bristol Bay. On the Pacific coast, winds will shift a little bit more. We'll keep our westerly flow from Castle Cape to Chignik, but south from Chignik to False Pass, look for a northerly flow at 25 knots with an 8-foot sea on Saturday. For the Aleutians, big changes here between Friday and Saturday, so watch carefully. Northwesterlies from Nikolsky to Unalaska, 20 to 25 knots. Light winds on the Pacific coast, look for seas around 8 feet. 9-foot seas from Adak to Kiska, 30 knots there, and variable winds in the west. Now, here's the big change. As we get into Saturday, there's that low pressure system again down to 932 millibars as we're forecasting it now. There will be some wind headlines there as we go into the weekend, so if you're out there looking for crab, make sure you're paying attention to the weather and have someone relay that weather information to you if you're not getting it well on your radio. Southeasterlies from Adak to Atka and Nikolsky, 50 to 55 knots with 15 to 17-foot seas, 60 to 65 knots in the west with 30-foot seas around the Kiska area. Higher gusts, of course, should be expected. And easterlies remain light on Saturday around Unalaska to Nikolsky, 35 to 40 knots, but they'll come up as you get into Sunday and probably on Monday. Across the west coast, northerlies coming out of the Bering Strait are going to be cold, 30 to 35 knots, 8 to 10-foot seas there. Northwesterlies around the Pribilofs at 25 knots. Freezing spray again close to the ice edge, so watch for that. Heavy freezing spray warnings continue for the southern Bering tomorrow. Look for northeasterlies around St. Lawrence Island at 30 knots and 25 to 35 knots across the southern Bering and outside of Kuskokwim Bay. 6 to 8-foot seas there, 40 knots expected around St. Matthew by Saturday from the east. Across the North Slope, things are settling down around the Beaufort Seacoast for now. 5 to 10 knot winds there, generally from the west and southwest. Down the Chukchi Coast, north and northeasterly winds around 10 to 20. And again, wind chill advisories posted for most of the North Slope as well as the areas around the central Beaufort Seacoast for tonight and early tomorrow. Winds are going to pick up as we head into Saturday for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast to 20 knots there, 15 to 25 knots down the Chukchi Seacoast for Saturday. A quick recap of tonight's weather into tomorrow shows low pressure quickly advancing across the central and western chain again to 932 knots. Have a good day.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Indie Alaska is a groundbreaking series that dives into the lives of people living in the last frontier. Each episode introduces you to colorful characters from around the state. Funding for Indie Alaska is provided in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company. Catch the latest episodes at alaskapublic.org.